hear so many stories. So what is the sharing news in this type of neighborhood? So we have a burden of a neighborhood. But we also have the burden of foreigners, because foreigners do not create problems for us. We create problems for ourselves, but it's also true that very often foreigners do not leave us alone to be able to find our own solutions. Sometimes when we are killing each other, it's as if the foreigners are lending us something to kill each other. But I'm not one of those people who argue that the problems of Rwanda before 94, as you remember, Ambassador Fratton, within the RPF, we used to think our problem is France and Belgium, because they love this Hutu regime, they love Hutus. And then of late, of course, since 1994, there are many people within the Hutu community who think that their problem is America, their problem is Britain, and I keep on telling them, no, the problem is ourselves. But let us also be vigilant and careful that foreigners don't lend us these destructive powers. So I would say that history is one of those difficult things. And I think truth-telling is very important, because until we come to the truth, how else shall we approach history? Because for a long time in Rwanda, since 94, we are not even teaching history, because we didn't have the version to teach. So I see this truth-telling project being part of the history that we have to tell, a history that has the bad and the good, and a history in which we see Hutus and Tutsis shifting positions between perpetrators and victims, good guys and bad guys, and figuring out how indeed this history project can finally become a project of creating the winners of tomorrow, all of us being the winners of tomorrow. It's a difficult proposal, but I think it's a doable proposal. The second part was, the prisoner, that's what I am, okay. The prison community has reduced over time, but it has reduced in a very inconclusive way, because it has gone through Gacaca, which is looked at by Hutus as the victor's justice, because it's only the Hutus who have to tell their sins, so that the Tutsis on the hill can forgive them or figure out how else to deal with them. But the problem is it doesn't also listen to how the Tutsis, especially the Tutsis within the military security establishment of RPF, were responsible on the same hills for committing very serious crimes in Rwanda, and of course later on in the Congo. So I think that's part, once again, it's part of the challenge. We need to figure out how to tell truth to each other, and then we can sit down and say, so since we have all these prisoners, the old ones and the new ones, once Kagame and company have been brought to account for their own sins, what shall we do with that prison community that we have in this country? I, for one, sometimes I have imagined, and when I said it, I attracted a lot of hostility from Kagame's camp. They called me mad. I said there should be a time in the future. I imagine it, and it interests me, and it motivates me to imagine one day in the future of Rwanda when we do not have anybody in jail. It doesn't matter whether somebody is guilty or not. I imagine that unless we can see a point in the future when we take that bold and risky proposal and say, guess what, there are all these people liable and guilty of so many crimes, what do we do with ourselves? Do we drive all of them to the sea and kill them? Or can we imagine a time when we say, okay, we have a new calendar, this is day one in the history of Rwanda, we absolutely have no prisoners. That's something for me, I keep on arguing about, people will call me mad, but I want to, if I have to make a mistake, I want to argue towards a more bold and risky proposal like that one. A day in the future of Rwanda when we don't have prisoners in Rwanda and other places around Africa and in the world. And then people in future will say, okay, but in the future if you do crazy things, then we shall take a very harsh position towards you. But for now we have to imagine something new. So that's, it's just a hypothesis. It's just a dream of mine. Maybe it's not widely shared by many people, but I want to imagine that there should be a day in the future of Rwanda when we don't have any prisoners.
It's more spiritual here.
Even before here.
Okay. Ashoka has relatively recently established an empathy initiative of any NGOs or independents work to put forth an empathy project in Rwanda based on Ashoka or other initiatives.
I honestly don't, but let me tell you one thing. This is a personal story. You won't believe it, my journey has taken me from being born into a very profoundly Christian family. I lost my father when I was bare 1 year old because of the events of Rwanda, and so I grew up under the custodianship of a very loving mother, but very spiritual Catholic mother. When I went into college, as many college students do, I turned rabidly against all matters of faith, and turned very Marxist, very much on the left. Still, I don't regret much of it except the part of Marxism that told me that in order to be very progressive and modern, you have to abandon all faith. I still find very interesting proposal from the Marxist faith because it also is some kind of faith. I find there's some interesting proposals from that in terms of social and economic systems. But in 2005, I regained my faith, my Christian faith, but from a probably not so much a dogmatic point of view. I wouldn't come here and start pontificating before you and turning you into Christians, although I hear in America you quarrel a lot about matters of faith. But I became a Christian partly because in my life, I've seen so much destruction in my life. I have seen so much death in my life that sometimes I have been left also to ponder and ask myself the true meaning and purpose of life. If you are a Rwandan and you've seen the kind of destruction that we've seen in Rwanda, it really leaves you with some kind of vague emptiness, and that's part of what I went through. Many people ask, how did you get divorced from Kagame? Because we're very close, and I was his chief of staff. He didn't fire me in 2004, no. I simply told him that I was leaving. He wondered why I was leaving. I left him to guess. After some time, he realized that maybe I had something up my sleeve, some naughty plan. He was not absolutely wrong, because I've resurfaced with this naughty plan of preaching peace and reconciliation. You can call it a naughty plan. But at some point, you may be seen, at the time, I might have been seen as one of those successful politicians or people close to the system, at the center of the system. I was at the center of the RPF system. And many people might have seen, oh, Teogene has really accomplished, he has arrived. And yet, at the pinnacle of all this, I felt a very vague emptiness, especially in contrast to this destruction that Rwandan people have suffered, Hutus and Tutsis, and for too long. Then you start asking yourself, what is the meaning of this? And to be honest, maybe it was too convenient to run for cover in regaining my Christian faith. But also, to be honest, I thank God for it, because only coming to Christ again could convict me in a very profound way and tell me at some point on the 1st of October that I had to tell the truth. Whether you call it my conscience or the spirit, as us Christians are fond of believing, it was that kind of spiritual milestone that I attained in my life that really shed all other pretenses and said, Theo, you are better off telling the truth rather than living a life of lies. Rwanda is a predominantly Christian nation, as you know. Sometimes people say, but how could a Christian nation have people who killed each other like savages, as we witnessed in 94 and after? But yes, it's a predominantly Christian nation. It's a very, matters of faith are very important even in ordinary people's lives. So whereas we cannot go through the spiritual route to solve political and social problems, I still believe that there is an element of spirituality and faith, especially for a broken nation. Christians understand brokenness. For a broken nation, can we also elicit in our society this whole notion of love, the notion of freedom, and the notion of forgiveness in contemplating the purpose and meaning of a Rwandan? And I said, yes, we can. But I truly, truly believe that this matter is not something that only a government can solve. I don't think so, because states are very brutal machines. It doesn't matter whether it's an American state or a Rwandan state. States were conceived in brutality and violence, as you know. For some of you, even in law, I'm sure you study all that. And so, can we try and develop civil society? Can we try and encourage the development of the press freedoms? Can we, through academic institutions like this one, promote this other soft side? I think, yes, we can. And so the spiritual dimension, I think, is very important. And I'm glad somebody asked it. But I was rather timid, because I have been told that in American public institutions I dare not talk about faith. So you will bear with me. I hope you won't take me to the sea for that.
Another question, I've heard many things about the different races or tribes, such as Tutsi and Hutus, or the tribes of Somalia or Sudan. How can America, as a still segregated and racist country, try to help in these countries? Should America be involved at all? Go ahead, have you stand up.
Let me have a rest. Let even South Africa, I think it should be
As I mentioned earlier, is this still working now? Okay. As I mentioned earlier, I told President Habyarimana democracy is a really tough thing to do. And we've been at it for 200 years, and we're not sure that we have it right yet. And as you've noticed, we still have some serious problems ourselves. I'm not sure that answers the question.
Ali, you can take a shot at that. You're an African like me.
I think America is a country, although probably when we're watching the Vikings, we're all Minnesotans or Americans, especially if we're playing the what is it, the Packers. There is a good question here. How can I lose it? There was a very good question. Oh yes. If we develop a process of power as a peaceful exchange for a government that represents all of its people, how do you propose individual identification? Recognize all as Rwandan rather than Tutsi Hutu. Will assimilate, suffer, or will it create a recognition of shared power?
That I would like